No one saw it coming, not the fans, not the media, not even them. Because this wasn't part of the image, not part of the story they were supposed to live. But feelings don't follow rules, and desire doesn't ask for permission. It starts small, a look that lasts too long, a moment that feels different. Until suddenly, it's not nothing anymore. Because when you realize you want a man, you feel it, not just in your head, but in your body, in your reactions, in the way you can't ignore him anymore. And that's when everything breaks, because now you're not playing a role anymore, you're facing the truth. Harry Styles, freedom, fluidity, and loving men without labels. Harry Styles represents a version of queerness that refuses to be defined by limits. The kind that doesn't need a label to be real because it exists in the way he feels, in the way he connects, in the way he allows himself to experience attraction without forcing it into something fixed. And in this fictional perspective, his connection with another man doesn't begin as something he questions. It begins as something he feels, something that exists in the way their energy aligns, in the way conversations flow, in the way emotional closeness naturally turns into something more, something that carries warmth, something that carries desire, something that makes being near him feel different in a way that doesn't need to be explained. And that's what makes his queerness so powerful. Because it is not built on hesitation, it is built on freedom, on the understanding that loving men is not something separate from who he is. It is part of the same openness that defines him, part of the way he experiences life without trying to limit it, and that kind of fluidity changes everything. Because now attraction is not something that has to fit into expectations. It becomes something that exists naturally, something that can be emotional, physical, or both. Something that grows without needing permission. And when he allows himself to feel that fully, when he allows himself to be close to another man without trying to define it too quickly, it becomes something beautiful, something that reflects authenticity, because now he is not hiding, not filtering, not holding back. He is simply living. And that kind of honesty is what makes his queerness inspiring, because it shows that being part of the LGBT community is not about restriction, it is about expansion. About allowing yourself to feel without limits, to love without fear, to exist in a way that is true to you, even when it doesn't fit into what people expect. And that message matters because it reminds people that loving men is not something that needs to be explained to be valid. It is something that can exist freely, something that deserves to be experienced fully, openly, and proudly. And that kind of truth is what makes identity real, not the labels attached to it, but the honesty behind it. Shawn Mendes. Soft realization, suppressed feelings, and accepting he wants a man. Shawn Mendes represents a version of queerness that begins in silence and the kind of feeling you don't immediately understand, the kind you try to push aside because it doesn't match what you expected from yourself. And in this fictional perspective, his attraction toward another man doesn't appear as something clear at first. It shows itself in small moments, in the way his attention lingers, in the way his emotions respond, in ways that feel slightly different but not yet defined. And at the beginning, it's easy to ignore, easy to convince himself that it's just connection, just admiration, something that doesn't need to be questioned. But over time, those moments start to build, they repeat, they become harder to dismiss, because when you feel something real, when your body reacts, when your thoughts return to someone without effort, it doesn't stay hidden forever. It grows. And that's when the conflict begins, because part of him starts to understand what it means, starts to recognize that this is not just emotional, this is something deeper, something that includes desire, something that exists in the way closeness begins to feel different, more personal, more physical. And that realization can feel overwhelming at first, not because it's wrong, but because it challenges the version of himself he thought he knew. And that creates hesitation, because accepting that you can want a man, that you can feel attraction toward another man, is not always easy when you've spent so long seeing yourself in a different way. But the truth doesn't disappear just because you try to ignore it. It stays. It shows itself in ways you can't control, in the way your emotions respond, in the way your body reacts, until eventually it becomes impossible to deny. And that's when everything shifts, because now it is no longer something he can push aside. It becomes something he has to face, something he has to understand. And that moment of realization is powerful, because it is not about losing who he is. It is about discovering more of who he is, about understanding that loving men is not something that takes away from his identity. It adds to it. It expands it. It allows him to feel more deeply, more honestly, and that kind of acceptance is what makes his queerness meaningful because it represents the journey from suppression to truth, from confusion to clarity, from hesitation to acceptance, and that journey is something many people understand because being part of the LGBT community is not always about knowing immediately. Sometimes it is about slowly allowing yourself to see what has always been there. And when he finally reaches that point, when he allows himself to accept that he can feel something real for another man, something emotional, something physical, something that exists fully, it becomes something freeing, something that removes the pressure of pretending, something that allows him to live more honestly, more openly, and that kind of truth is what makes identity real, because it is not something you force, it is something you uncover, something you accept, something you live, and once you do, once you allow yourself to feel it fully, there is no going back, only forward into a version of yourself that is more complete, more honest, and more real than ever before. The Weeknd, Darkness, Desire, and Wanting a Man. He Can't Escape from the Weeknd represents a version of queerness that doesn't feel soft or safe. It feels intense, complicated, the kind that pulls you in even when you know it might hurt. And in this fictional perspective, his attraction toward another man doesn't come from peace or clarity. It comes from tension, from the kind of connection that feels addictive, something that exists in the way their energy clashes and aligns at the same time, something that keeps pulling him back no matter how much he tries to step away. And that's what makes it different, because this is not just emotional connection, this is desire. Something physical. Something that lives in the way closeness feels, in the way being near him creates a kind of tension that is hard to ignore, something that makes even silence feel heavy. Something that turns every interaction into something charged, something that feels like it could cross a line at any moment, and that intensity is what makes it dangerous, because when you feel something like that, for another man, when your body reacts, when your emotions follow, when your thoughts keep returning to him even when you try to move on, it becomes something you can't control, something that exists whether you allow it or not, and that's where the conflict lives, because part of him wants to stay in it, wants to feel it fully, wants to experience that connection without holding back. But another part of him knows how much power it has over him, knows that it's not something easy, not something simple. And that tension between wanting and resisting is what makes his queerness so deep, because this is not about questioning whether it's real. It is about dealing with how real it is, about understanding that loving a man, wanting a man in that way, can be intense, can be overwhelming, can change everything about how you experience connection. And that realization doesn't come with comfort. It comes with truth. Because once you feel something like that, once you allow yourself to experience desire toward another man at that level, you can't go back to seeing it as something small, something harmless. It becomes part of you, something that shapes how you feel, how you connect, how you understand yourself. And that's what makes his story meaningful, because it shows that being part of the LGBT community is not always soft or easy. Sometimes it is intense, sometimes it is complicated. Sometimes it forces you to confront parts of yourself that you didn't expect, but that doesn't make it less valid. It makes it real, because queerness is not one single experience. It can be calm or chaotic, soft or intense, but all of it deserves to exist. All of it deserves to be understood. And when he finally allows himself to accept that, when he stops trying to escape from what he feels and starts understanding it as part of who he is, something shifts, because now the intensity is no longer something he fears. It becomes something he owns, something he understands, something he allows himself to feel without pretending it's not there. And that kind of honesty is what makes identity real, because it is not about whether it's easy. It is about whether it's true. And loving a man like that, feeling something that strong, is as real as it gets. Justin Bieber, faith, conflict, and accepting that he can love a man too. Justin Bieber represents a version of queerness that grows through conflict, through the tension between what you've been taught and what you actually feel. The kind of journey that doesn't begin with acceptance, but with questioning, with trying to understand why your emotions don't align with what you expected from yourself. And in this fictional perspective, his attraction toward another man is not something he immediately embraces. It is something he notices, but struggles to accept, something that appears in moments that feel real but complicated, in the way his attention shifts, in the way emotional connection begins to carry a weight that feels deeper than it should in the way closeness starts to feel different, more personal, more physical, something that exists not just in his thoughts, but in his body. And that realization creates tension because when you've been raised to see yourself in a certain way, when your beliefs shape how you understand love, feeling something that challenges that can feel overwhelming, not because it's wrong, but because it forces you to question everything. And that's where his conflict lives, in the space between what he feels and what he thinks he's supposed to feel, because part of him recognizes the truth, recognizes that he is drawn to another man, that he feels something real, something that includes desire, something that exists fully, but another part of him resists it, tries to hold on to the version of himself that feels safer, more expected, and that internal struggle is what makes his queerness so deep, because it is not about confusion, it is about knowing and not wanting to accept it yet. And that kind of tension doesn't disappear easily, it stays, it builds, it becomes something that shows itself in moments he can't control, in reactions that feel too real to ignore, until eventually it becomes impossible to deny, because truth doesn't fade just because you try to push it away. It waits, it grows, it becomes something that demands to be understood, and that's when the shift begins, because at some point he has to decide whether he continues to fight what he feels or allows himself to accept it. And that acceptance is not easy, but it is freeing, because the moment he stops seeing his attraction toward men as something that contradicts his identity and starts understanding it as part of it, everything changes, because now he is no longer divided, no longer trying to suppress one part of himself to protect another. He is whole, he is honest, he is finally allowing himself to feel without fear. And that's what makes his story meaningful, because it shows that being part of the LGBT community is not always about immediate clarity. Sometimes it is about working through conflict, about allowing yourself to question, to struggle, to understand, until you reach a place where you can accept yourself fully. And that acceptance is what creates peace, because now you are not hiding, not fighting, not pretending. You are simply living in your truth. And that truth, no matter how long it takes to reach, is always worth it, because it allows you to love honestly, to connect deeply, to exist without holding yourself back. And that is what makes identity real, not how easy the journey is, but how honest it becomes in the end. Bad Bunny, confidence, fluidity, and loving men without apology. Bad Bunny represents a version of queerness that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that exists boldly, openly, without trying to make itself easier for others to accept. And in this fictional perspective, his attraction toward men is not something he discovers with hesitation. It is something he recognizes and chooses to live fully, because when you understand that your identity is yours, not something defined by expectation, loving a man becomes something that doesn't need to be hidden or explained. It becomes something you can express, something you can stand in confidently. And that's what makes his queerness so powerful, because it is not built on doubt, it is built on ownership, on the understanding that attraction toward men is not something that reduces who you are. It is something that exists alongside everything else, something that adds to your identity rather than taking away from it. And that kind of confidence changes how you experience everything, because now you're not filtering your feelings. You're not holding back. You are allowing yourself to feel desire, connection, intimacy with another man without hesitation. And that kind of openness is what creates real freedom, because you're no longer living within boundaries that were never meant for you. You are living in your truth fully, unapologetically, and that truth is visible not just in what you say, but in how you exist, in how you move, in how you allow yourself to be seen. And that visibility matters, because it challenges expectations. It breaks the idea that queerness has to look a certain way. It proves that masculinity, confidence, and attraction toward men can exist together without contradiction. And that message is important, because it gives others permission to do the same, to stop hiding, to stop reducing themselves, to stop feeling like they have to choose between who they are and how they are perceived. And when he lives like that, when he allows himself to love men openly, to feel desire without shame, it becomes something bigger than just his own story. It becomes a representation. It becomes a reminder that being part of the LGBT community is not about fitting in. It is about standing out, about owning who you are without fear. And that kind of pride is not quiet, it is strong, it is visible, it is something that cannot be ignored. And that's what makes his story powerful, because it shows that loving men is not something to hide behind closed doors. It is something to celebrate, something to live out loud, something that deserves to exist fully, openly, and without ever needing to be justified, and that is where true identity becomes unstoppable. When you're no longer asking whether it is allowed, you're simply living it. And that is what real freedom looks like. They tried to ignore it, tried to hide it, tried to convince themselves it wasn't real. But truth doesn't disappear. It waits until you stop running, because wanting a man is not a mistake. It's not confusion. It's not something you can delete like a story online. It stays, it becomes part of you, and once you accept it, once you stop pretending, everything changes, not because you lost who you were, but because you finally became real. Because being part of the LGBT community is not about being different, it's about being honest, and honesty will always be louder than any image you tried to protect.